Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the White Belt MMA podcast. And it's an absolute pleasure to have on the show today MMA journalist, someone I've been watching for a while, James Lynch, man. This man's working for everyone. This man's getting interviews with the top stars in the sport today. And once again, I mean, it's an absolute pleasure. And it's like I told James off camera, it's a trip that I'm talking to him today because I've been watching his videos for the longest time. So, James, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on. Great intro, 10 out of 10. I appreciate that. And man, I'm just happy to talk to you, man. I'm just a regular guy like you who loves MMA and happen to turn this into a job. So yeah, we're on the same wavelength here, man. So the pleasure's all mine.
Yeah, definitely, man. So, man, James, I have to ask, man, how'd you get into covering the sport of MMA? Because, like, for me, right, I mean, I've always been a big fan. I remember the first fight that I watched was actually the first Anderson Silva and Chael Sonnen fight. And then I've been hooked ever since. So for you, what was your thing? What was the thing that got you hooked to watching MMA and to having an interest in the sport?
So I'm going to back up a little bit before I started watching MMA because they kind of tie together. So growing up, I was for like a period during my teens, I was a pro wrestling fan during the Attitude Era. I'm kind of revealing my age here by mentioning that, but it was one of those things that I loved it. I was totally into it. And then fast forward to when I'm in university. Now I'll preface that as well by saying I went to university because I knew I wanted to be on camera. I wanted to be a reporter, but I wanted to cover hockey. I grew up in Canada. That's kind of a rite of passage. Like you have to be a hockey fan. I played hockey growing up. So it was just that was the plan. And then I started watching The Ultimate Fighter the first season. So we're talking, and funny timing of us doing this with Diego Sanchez fighting this weekend. But that was for me what got me hooked. I just remember scrolling through the channels on Spike TV and seeing this reality show. And I'm like, what is this? And I immediately got hooked. I started watching that show. Back then, like we were called tough noobs. Like that was, you were considered like, oh, you just joined, because obviously there was fans who'd watch it from the beginning. But that's what got me hooked in. And then I started watching Pride FC back when it was going on. And then fast forward a bit, I'm kind of, I finished school, ended up getting an internship, at the time I was living in Ottawa, going to school there. And then I went to move to Toronto, and the Fight Network was there. And the Fight Network is still happening these days as far as a network, but ended up getting an internship there and ended up getting hired there shortly after, just doing some editing. And this was, back in, this was ages ago when I started working there, but Mauro Ranallo was there at the time I was actually working there. So, he was there. John Ramdeen, who does a lot of commentary as well, was there. John Pollock was there. And I got to learn from a really good group of people with me getting into the industry. So that was sort of my first brush of working in MMA. I'll kind of, skip a bunch of stuff so we can kind of not take up too much time. But so I was working there, and then I've always worked in television, behind the scenes and even on camera as well too. And so after I left Fight Network, I worked at a few other networks, and I was doing MMA stuff on the side. At the time, there weren't a lot of people doing like what we're doing here, remote video interviews. So I figured this was a good opportunity for me to not only get on camera, but also continue to do some MMA stuff. So fast forward to 2017, I find out I'm going to be a dad. I can't do both. I had a day job, working like a 9 to 5, and then doing the interviews on the side, like a lot of people do, right? Like that's sort of what, how people get into this. And my wife's kind of like, you can't do both. And she was right. Like I was coming home from work doing interviews. If I got a kid, I got to be a good dad. So I quit my day job, and I ended up doing this full time, a little bit differently than some other people. People that do this full time, they typically get hired by like, MMA Fighting or MMA Junkie. But what I did was I was like, I'm just going to work for as many companies as I can, and that'll make up like a full-time salary. And so that's basically what I've done since 2017 is just, make a living just interviewing fighters and, getting paid for those interviews. And they, obviously own the interview. But that's been a way that I've sort of worked my way up. But I think that's a long-winded answer to that question, but I kind of answered it there, hopefully.
No, yeah, you definitely did, man. And I do have to ask, man, because like you said, it's like it was a big decision, right? Like you had a full-time job, you just had a kid, and like your wife said, you can't do both. So for you, like you had your wife's support, but like for anybody else, like friends, family, and everything like that, did they kind of give you like some flag, like, oh man, is this the right decision? Because I can imagine, So
Yeah, I mean, there because like back then, and I mean, obviously things have changed since 2017, but back then it's like, you grow up to go to a company and you work there and you stay there forever. And I had a good job, like I had benefits, you name it. But to me, it's like this was going so well, I didn't want to just give it up. So it was strategic. Like, it's not like I just like, went in this and hope for the best. Like I definitely had a bunch of stuff lined up before I quit. And I figured like, worst comes to worst, like even if something like falls out here, at least I have like so many companies that I'm working for. If something doesn't work out, at least I've got, enough where I can still make money. So I wasn't really concerned about that. It was just more about like, is this going to be able to, feed my family and all this stuff? And it has like, and granted, I work a lot. Like I do a lot of interviews. I do a lot of, content. But it's enough where I'm able to kind of do this on my own. And it's interesting because like, it kind of worked out because now we're seeing like a lot of these big name guys kind of do the same thing. Like Ariel Helwani leaving ESPN because he's probably like, look, I don't need ESPN. I'm the guy, John Morgan just recently left MMA Junkie. So I think we're discovering, especially in this day and age when it comes to content, that the brand is the most important thing, not necessarily the outlet. And that's kind of what I've been doing is just, I think people don't know me for James Lynch of such and such outlet. It's just, hey, it's James Lynch, the guy who interviews all the fighters. So I kind of lucked out that way too, where I kind of saw an opening at the time anyways, that there wasn't a lot of people doing remote interviews. And two, I was like, I'll interview anyone. Like, I don't care. Like, I need the practice to just get better on camera. And I also know that some of these guys are going to end up being like big deals. Like Sean O'Malley's an example. I interviewed him when he was in LFA and like, he was not what he is today. And just to have those relationships early on is such a key thing. And it's a thing that I think a lot of newcomers make a mistake on, is that they just feel like, well, I just got to get those big names and then I'll make it. It's like, no, it's, you got to put the work in, you got to build these relationships. And I think that's another reason why I found success, is that people know, like, I'm not an ego guy. I'm not like I'm the best ever or whatever. I'm just a guy who likes doing this. And I've been able to build these relationships that have served me even to this day. Like I have an interview later today from a guy that I've interviewed since well before he was in the UFC, and he's headlining a card, Curtis Blades. So, and for me, it's because he knows, what he's going to get with an interview with me, because we've done so many. So again, long-winded answer, but hopefully I answered
Oh man, I keep on doing, man. Like I said, it's awesome to hear people's stories. And but like, I do have to ask, man, like, do you remember those that first interview, like those, like that nervous feeling you had? Because like for me, I go back to watch my first interview and I'm like, God, it's cringeworthy.
Oh, of course.
So it's like you said, it's like the more interviews you've gotten, like the more reps you got. So, tell us about that first interview, man. And if so, tell us how it was.
So the first interview I technically ever did was actually with Bjorn Rebney when he was running Bellator, and it was a phone interview. And, I was a little nervous, but it's a bit easier because you can't see the person and, you can edit it. And so it was fine. I think my first video interview, like remote interview, might've been Misha Serkinov. I have to go back and look on my channel, but like those early ones, like, I was using Avair to record my interviews on Skype. I still stand by Skype. I think a lot of people use Zoom. I have a whole video on this, by the way. I prefer using Skype because the quality is so much better. But, looking back, I mean, there's little things that I was doing that I don't do now that you sort of learn from. And here's the other thing, like there was no blueprint. Like you had Ariel Helwani, who has, built up his brand and done his thing, but really there wasn't a lot of people like telling you this is what you should be doing, what you shouldn't. I was lucky early on. I did have a few people I would reach out to and be like, hey, what do you think of this? What do I need to do? And they gave me some really good advice. And it's just the evolution. But here's one thing I'll mention to you and your audience, is that like, don't worry so much about the early stuff. If it looks bad or whatever, we're not supposed to get this right off the bat. So the more you can learn from it, the key is to learn from it, not think you got this all figured out. The more you can learn from it, from not only just being on camera, but also the production side of things. Like what you see here is nothing close to what I had when I started, I was using a different webcam, I was using a different microphone. And just along the way you learn, and I'm always, obsessed with, production. So I'm always trying to find like ways of making content look better. And so, what you see now has been years of mistakes of other things to get me to this point. And I think that's just a good rule in life, is you're going to make mistakes, just learn from them and try and get better.
Yeah, definitely, man. And like you said, like the more you've done like the interviews and all that, like in 2019, you got to cover all these events and all that like that. Did I get the year right? 2019 was like the year all over?
Yeah, actually, well, I mean, the first UFC event I covered actually was UFC 165, Jones and Gustafson. Like,
oh man,
check
what a
this
fight.
Story out. This was this was just like total luck. So I live in Canada, and we have TSN, which is like our ESPN. So I was actually working there for my day job. I was a digital editor. I was basically in charge. Me and a team were responsible for all the highlights you'd see on the website. So I was working there, but I'd come over from Fight Network, and one of the guys that ran sort of the written side of the page was like, "Hey man, I know you used to work at Fight Network. Would you want to do some writing for us on the the website. And this was back when TSN didn't even have the UFC rights. It was just, I guess they just wanted content. I said, yeah, of course. So through that, me basically working for free for them, just doing like a couple articles a week or whatever, I was able to get credentials. And I mean, this is something that like doesn't happen to most people, but like, I mean, the first MMA event I ever covered was UFC 165, one of the greatest fights of all time. I was front row too, because it was in Toronto at the time I was living there. And, you know, it was front row and all that. And it was amazing. And from there, I'm like, man, I can use them for credentials. So I did that for years. And even when I had my day job, I was working for TSN on the side. So I was able to get these credentials and continue to do events. So I probably covered like 20 something UFC events, but you're right. The last event I covered was December of 2019. Colby Covington, Kamaru Usman won. And then
man, another great fight.
I know. It was nuts. And, but I haven't covered anything since then, because in Canada, like to go travel, you need to do all this PCR testing and all this. And it's expensive. It's like 200 US just to get back into Canada. And I was just like, I can't justify like, and plus all the restrictions, like what type of content am I going to be able to get that while I'm down there, as I'm fumbling over my words here. But that for me is why I haven't gone back. But it's funny you mentioned that. I'm in the process right now of getting credentials for July. I'm going to probably go to International Fight Week that first week and get back in the saddle. Cause man, it's been so long. Covering events is probably my favorite thing of doing, favorite thing to do in this sport, is to be on the front lines and get those interviews like one-on-one in person. And yeah, so if all goes well, July, I forget what the date is exactly, but the International Fight Week card in July is kind of what I'm aiming to go at.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you know, I had to ask that because I was at you know, a couple of weeks ago, I got the chance to cover my first live event, Bellator 274. And that was honestly the biggest trip that I've had like in a while since doing this. Cause like I remember like it's like I started this during like the pandemic, right? Like the start of it. I was like, I'm gonna start the page, build up my following, hopefully get to the point that I can, you know, start doing interviews. And then to bring it to the point that I'm like at my first live event, front row, people, you have the whole thing. It was wild. It was wild. So I had to ask, man, because it's something that like you said, it's like I feel like it's no better feeling than just kind of feeling the atmosphere and the adrenaline of just like seeing the fights back close.
And it's so valuable to gain that experience, like just to be there in the trenches and figure out how the media works. Because again, there's like no resources. I know there's the MMA JA, but that's kind of, it is what it is. But like there's no like blueprint on how to do this at all. Like you look at other sports, right? Like you want to cover hockey or baseball or whatever, like there's a process you got to go through, go to school, intern. And then there's lots of resources in terms of people that could tell you how it works. But in MMA, it's really word of mouth. Bellator, I'm glad you brought them up, because they're a great promotion in the sense that they'll pretty much give credentials to anyone. I mean, unless you have to be like a total screw up or something, but like but the reason I bring that up is like, it's important to get like a lot of people starting out. If you're watching this, Bellator is the way to go, because you'll learn so much from there and you'll see how things, you know, sort of go down. And then and UFC is really strict with credentials. Like they're like you could have like a huge Instagram page or YouTube page. They're pretty strict about that. Like they're more inclined to give the traditional media outlets, like your newspapers and your radio outlets and stuff, a chance at getting credentials. But with them, they're a little bit more strict. So yeah, Bellator, if you live close to a Bellator event, I highly recommend going, because the experience you'll gain there is just super valuable.
Yeah, man. And I mean, I feel like this is like the perfect way to kind of transition to, you know, you doing your interviews for Chris Cyborg. So like, you know, the catch up. So how did that come up? Was it just kind of like you said, like just, you know, years of like, you know, interviewing her and the connections, and you guys kind of just, you know, decided to start this whole thing, the catch up?
Yeah. So what happened was, this was back when I just left the Score. This is another part I left out of the story, but I used to work for the Score, which is like a huge app. They're with Barstool now, or they're owned by Penn, I think, which is the same company as Barstool. Yeah, I was a senior MMA news editor there. COVID hit, and then they just eliminated my position. I was senior MMA news editor, so I was there full time for about a year, and then it went back to freelance. And you know, I sort of put the word out there, like, hey, I'm looking for work, and I didn't know what the landscape was going to look like, because you know, you're off for a year of being a freelancer, so I had no idea what type of work was out there. So I was like, I'll pretty much do anything just to, you know, make sure that I can feed my family and all that. And I got work right away. And I think being at the Score actually helped my brand a little bit more, because I was getting better interviews. I was going to events like almost every month when I was working there. It was awesome. Like I got to cover like Diaz and Masvidal in New York. I got to cover, you know, even Gegard Mousasi and Lyoto Machida in LA for Bellator. Like I was going to events regularly, and that really helped kind of profile things up. Anyways, the reason that ties into the Cyborg thing is like right after I sort of made the, you know, the sort of put the bat signal out there, like, hey, I'm looking for some more work.
Yeah.
Her team reached out to me, and actually initially they wanted me to do some video editing for some video blogs that they were going to do. And I was like, yeah, like I can edit video. Like that's cool with me, whatever. And then, we hadn't talked for a bit, and then they got back to me and they're like, how'd you feel about doing a show every week with Chris on her channel? And I said, yeah, I'm down. So we've been doing it since I think July of 2020. And it's fun. Like, cause I get, info from her before most people. It's just basically like a quick, like 10-minute show where we just sort of go through all the news headlines. And if there's anything pertaining to Chris, then we'll obviously talk about it as well. But yeah, man, super lucky to be doing that. Like, and their team's great. Like they're easy to work with. And yeah, can't say enough good things about that. And Chris and her team have just been nothing, cause I know you read stuff in the news and stuff, but I've had zero issues with them, and they've been nothing but awesome to me.
Yeah, definitely, man. And then, the fact that they just announced her big fight in April in Hawaii, I feel like they kind of played a little switcheroo, right? Because didn't they say that it was supposed to be the
Kavanaugh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can kind of read between the lines there. There's something going on with Bellator and Chris, and even, with us talking to each other, we're not exactly sure what that is, because it looked like, I mean, let's get real here. It should have been her and Kat Zingano. I don't know why that didn't happen. Chris, I know Chris well enough that I know obviously she wants the fight, UFC veteran, former title challenger, all that stuff. And now, she's fighting, she's having a rematch. Well, first it was Sinead Kavanaugh, and it's like, they just had that fight. Why? What's the, like, unless you're really wanting Sinead to win, or I don't know what the deal is there. And now they're doing Arlene Blencoe, which, yeah, I mean, decent fight, but I mean, Bellator's supposed to be this, promotion that has all these women featherweights, and we're already doing rematches with Cyborg, who just signed 2 years ago, not even. So yeah, it's disappointing. It's too bad that they couldn't end up getting Kayla Harrison, because that's a fight that everyone wants to see. But I kind of get the sense that, once this Bellator contract's up, which apparently is in a few fights, Chris might be looking at maybe going to a PFL or something. We'll see. But yeah, I think a lot of us just want to see those fights, those competitive matchups, and it just really hasn't been like that for Chris and Bellator.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like I do have to ask this. So let's say, after, Chris Cyborg, her contract's up, she finished up her last fight. Do you think if PFL makes that run for Chris Cyborg, they can definitely change up like the whole MMA landscape? Because we always, I don't know, for me, I've always looked at like, obviously like, UFC, Bellator, they've always been there. But then I feel like the PFL, it's been kind of just like right under there. Do you think if they get Chris Cyborg, it's just going to change the whole landscape? Because you've got, they've gotten more people, Anthony Pettis, Jeremy Stevens. So yeah, it kind of seems like they're making a run to kind of take Bellator's spot.
Yeah, they got a lot of money. I mean, they've been handing out $1 million checks for the last couple of years now, which is great. I just don't know if this is sustainable, because like my only question is like, who's watching all these PFL events all the time? Because I mean, you look at now, even 5 years ago, you didn't have this much MMA on. So it's like, it's tough to keep track, even as someone who does this for the living. Like I can't tune into every live PFL thing. I usually PVR it or record it or whatever, and I'll catch up later. But yeah, I don't know, like getting a Cyborg would be good, but I think like they would need to get like something like someone in their prime right now if they wanted to even think about competing with the UFC. I think the UFC is going to be like the WWE. Their brand is so strong that I don't think anyone is going to be able to outmatch them, outtake them, unless like something crazy happens. Like a Conor McGregor would have to go to like a PFL or a Bellator for there to be any sort of competition. The UFC, I think no matter what, they have so many fighters. They're the premier brand. I think it's just so hard to compete with them. And I also wonder the longevity of PFL. I know they have a lot of investors, but like, what is their viewership like? And now they're talking about doing pay-per-view. I think it's a huge mistake. Like, listen, I'm the biggest MMA fan there is, but I'm not paying to watch Anthony Pettis compete on a pay-per-view. I'm just not. Like, he's a guy that, in the UFC was running into some trouble. So I just wonder, how it's going to work out. And I think PFL, and let me also just add that I think PFL and Bellator and all these places are great. I want the fighters to get paid more. I think they are severely underpaid, but we got to be realistic as well about what the future is going to look like. And I just think the UFC's got such a strong, hold on this industry that it's going to be tough for anyone to give them any competition.
Have they set a price tag yet for the PFL pay-per-view yet, or are they just
haven't? It was just sort of talked, and then they had this super series or whatever, I guess, of whatever. But man, it's just like Bellator tried pay-per-view a couple of years ago, if you remember. It did not go well. I just don't see it. Like, we're paying enough as it is. Like, the UFC just hiked the pay-per-view prices. You've got, Fight Pass, you've got ESPN Plus, you've got, PFL's on Fubo TV now. It's very expensive to be a combat sports fan. That's not even including like boxing and other, things as combat sports as well. So, I don't know. I think it's going to be a tough sell, but we'll see. I wish them the best.
Yeah, wasn't there like a crazy number that came out like on the internet? It's like if you're like a UFC fan, if like you bought every pay-per-view, it was like definitely like over $1,000 Like,
Oh,
yeah.
I know, like I buy every pay-per-view because I do the watch alongs.
Mhm.
Now being my own business, I'm allowed to write that off for my taxes. So I get it at the end of the year, but still
Yeah.
like it adds up, man. Like even like a Fight Pass subscription, you're looking at like $100. In Canada, because we don't have ESPN Plus. So all of our like the prelims and stuff, they air on TSN, which most people have in their cable package. So that's at least saving a bit there. But yeah, it's expensive, man. Like they can't like you honestly like you're encouraging people to pirate if you're going to charge that much. And what I think they should do, and I've said this for years, is why not do, I guess in the case, it would be like an ESPN Plus case, but why not do like you pay for the year and you get a discount on the pay-per-views or something,
Yeah.
or maybe you get like a free pay-per-view, like something to give some incentive to people signing up, because like you're going to encourage people to pirate stuff, and that's not what you want.
Yeah, I know, especially after was it Fight Island that like Dana White was like really going
Oh yeah.
harsh on like the people pirating the pay-per-views. I don't know. I feel like that was funny because like it brought some great memes, because I feel like this is the one good thing about the MMA community. I don't know if like how in tune are you with the memes and
Oh
all
yeah.
that, but God, those memes about Dana, going after those people pirating the fight, it was the funniest thing ever.
Or the clip from The Ultimate Fighter where I forget what it was in regards to, but Dana White saying that's effing illegal. You know, I don't
Yeah.
know if I'm allowed to swear in here, but like people using that anytime there's like a pay-per-view talk, I think I'm all about the memes. I love that stuff. Like the Kevin Holland thumbs up from 272
Yeah.
last weekend. Like I love that stuff. I love memes. So
Yeah, man. I have to ask you now that you brought that up, 272 and all that, Jorge Masvidal, Colby Covington. What did you think about the fight? Because, I feel like, before the fight, unfortunately, that's the way I kind of saw the fight going. But,
yeah.
it kind of sucks, especially like, seeing Jorge, just, I don't know what you think about the fight. And yeah,
I thought it was pretty.
over.
Yeah, it was pretty predictable. I mean, Colby always had the edge in the wrestling.
Mhm.
Like Masvidal could train with whoever; it wouldn't matter. Like Colby's had years of wrestling. Not only that, both of them know training together. Someone had the edge there. Obviously, it was Colby,
Mhm.
and you sort of know that was going to happen. And the other thing is like I think a lot of people put too much stock into some of those knockout wins that Masvidal had. Like I saw a
Yeah.
lot of people, and they're not. You don't see many of them this week, but saying that Masvidal was going to knock out Colby in the first round. Like the Askren knockout only happened because Ben shot for the takedown.
Yeah.
If Ben didn't do that, that fight could have gone completely different. He
Yeah.
knocked out Darren Till as well. I'll give him that. He knocked out Cerrone too, but Till cut a lot of weight, more susceptible to the knockout. Like you could kind of look at some of these knockouts and go, does he really have, like, he doesn't have like the Dan Henderson type knockout power. Like Jamal Hill is a probably better example these days of someone who can just like any given moment can knock your lights out. So I felt like that was something that people were kind of overvaluing. And the fact that like you look at Colby, it took Usman till the 5th round to finish him in the first fight. The second round, he wasn't able to finish him. And Usman knocked out Masvidal. So it's like, I think it was a pretty predictable outcome. And I thought the fight was good. I mean, you're not going to get like a rock'em sock'em type battle. Like, why would you play to your strengths? Colby definitely did that in the fight, and I thought it was a good main event. I thought it was a good grudge match. You don't see these real life like grudge like pro wrestling storylines in MMA too often. So I was all about it. I know some people complain, oh, not a title fight, all this stuff. I don't know. I'm here for it. I need to be invested in a fight, and to me, the former teammates and the fact that it's a pivotal fight for both, with both coming off losses to Usman, I think was very key in that fight being really awesome, I thought.
Yeah, and do you think that Colby gets that Dustin Poirier fight? Especially with that call, man. I feel like he's getting more and more violent like more and more intense and more. And I don't know what's the word for it, but like these call outs and mentioning people's kids and all that. I don't know.
It's strategic. The fact
yeah.
that we're even talking about this means that what he's doing is working. And look,
Yeah.
here's how I see Colby, what he's trying to do here. He wants to fight a big name. Like Poirier, of anyone in the welterweight division right now, is probably a bigger name other than maybe Chimaev. Chimaev, if you look at the numbers, I mean, the guy's just a view machine. Everyone loves that guy. He thinks he's the next Tyson or whatever. I don't know, or Rousey. I don't know who you want, what analogy you want to use, but like Poirier is a huge name there. Poirier would be moving up in weight, so Colby would already have that advantage. I know Poirier does walk around, he cuts a lot of weight, but still, I mean, Poirier used to fight at 45. There's not a chance in hell Colby Covington's making 45. So I just think that Colby's being very strategic. A lot of the fighters that you've seen him compete against are somewhat notable, right? He fought Woodley, former champion, and they had some beef. You have, him fighting Robbie Lawler, former champion, notable name on the tail end of his career. So you notice he's not calling out Luque or Bilal Muhammad or like Chimaev or Gilbert Burns or any of these guys, because those are not notable names and those are dangerous fights. Poirier, He's still dangerous. I mean, he had a pretty competitive fight with Oliveira. He's got the wins over McGregor, but I mean, him moving up, you would favor Colby in that fight. And I think Colby's very strategic. And to answer your question, I don't think it happens because I think Poirier hates Colby so much. He wouldn't even want to give him the opportunity. Poirier, I think, has got a couple fights left, maybe a Diaz fight. I don't know, whatever's going to end up panning out. But I don't know where Colby goes from here because he's kind of running out of options for like fighting name guys that he could beat. One name I threw out on my Q&A this morning, I know it wouldn't make sense because he's coming off a couple losses, but Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is probably one of the few notable names in that division that Colby would beat. And outside of that, I don't know who else. Like, I don't see him fighting a Chimaev. I don't see him fighting a Burns. Like, I think if Chimaev beats Burns, he's getting the next title shot after what should be the winner of Usman and Edwards. There's a lot at play right now in the welterweight division, but I'm curious to see what's next for Colby.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what's next for Colby too. And we've kind of mentioned wrestling a little bit there. So like, I've seen in other videos, man, that you're a big wrestling fan. So for you, you've been keeping up with the current product, WWE, AEW, and what you think about it.
So I'd say I'm a casual wrestling fan now. Yeah. I don't like actively watch AEW or anything. I follow a lot of wrestling guys on social media. I used to work at Fightful with Sean Ross Sapp. He's one of the best wrestling journalists out there. So I kind of keep tabs on it. Like, I know the Hardy Boys, I think, went to AEW, or Jeff Hardy left, I think. So I keep tabs on that. But I was a big pro wrestling fan from like the Attitude Era, like for a couple of years. Like, I used to watch every pay-per-view. I used to watch all the the matches. I guess I don't know what you want to call it, fight matches, doesn't matter. And that was like a golden era of my childhood, teenage years and stuff too. So I keep tabs in it, but like, I couldn't tell you who the WWE like cruiserweight champion is right now. I don't know, but I keep tabs in it for sure.
Yeah. And favorite moment from the Attitude Era? Like, one that still
sticks
out?
It has to be Hell in the Cell, Mankind and Undertaker, Mankind falling off the cage. I mean, that was great. Mike Tyson, a special guest referee for the Shawn Michaels and Stone Cold Steve Austin, where he switched sides, right? He was part of D-Generation X and then ended up being on Stone Cold's side after that fight. There's so many, man. Like, I gotta get I've been telling my wife, you want to get me a birthday gift or present or something, get me a subscription to the WWE network, because I'll go back and watch all those old things. Like, I love watching the wrestling documentaries. They had the A&E series. Dark Side of the Ring is awesome. I watched every episode of that. There's some stuff, it's like I had no clue that stuff was going on. Like, I'm all about that, man. Like, I love revisiting like stuff that I remember like from like my childhood or whatever, and seeing going back and seeing all the stories, because it's a nutty industry, the pro wrestling industry.
It really is, man. So, man, once again, James, like I said, thank you for giving me the time, because, like I said, I've been watching it for years. So the fact that I'm getting to talk to you is just the coolest thing. But, one last question before I let you go, man.
Sure.
Goals for 2022, man. You've kind of mentioned it, like you kind of want to, get back and hopefully cover some events live. But, do you have any other goals that you want to, set place for 2022 and hopefully, set to accomplish this year?
Yeah, I think for me, it's about just continuing to grow the brand. You mentioned the events. I mean, that'll help if I'm going to a couple events. I'd like to cover at least 2 events this year. I know that's not a lot, but I got 2 kids. It's tough to kind of negotiate, and figure out a time to like go cover the events. But I definitely want to cover more events. Definitely do more in-person interviews. Like living here in Vancouver, there's a lot of gyms around here. There's a couple of UFC fighters that live here. Lupe Godinez, Tristan Connolly. There's a few that I could go in person and do interviews. So that's doing more of that this year with stuff opening up and COVID, hopefully taking a little bit of a backseat here, but so there's that. And then, just trying to, just like I said, building the brand more, getting more interviews, interviewing fighters that I haven't interviewed before, just continuing to work that, and just landing more sponsorship deals. That's been a big help with what I'm trying to do is, utilizing my content more, like I got the pros picks on my YouTube channel. I've got, my weekly podcast, my Q&A, just getting more sponsorships like that. So I don't have to work as much, because I do work a lot like it is. And I only have myself to blame, because I make my own schedule, but just trying to get, I guess, to put it in simple terms, trying to get paid more to do the stuff I'm already doing and doing less work, which is the goal of everyone, right? I mean, if we had it our way, we do that. But like, I was just on vacation last week in Cancun, Mexico with my wife and our 2 kids. And it was awesome. And it was good to like recharge the batteries, but I just couldn't wait to get back and get back into the saddle. Cause I feel like when you're away, you're missing out. I'm obviously keeping tabs, but I didn't do any interviews while I was away, but just happy to get back to it. So I guess to kind of answer your question, go to more events, do more in-person stuff, build up the brand, land more sponsorship deals, and just, continue to get better. Find little areas of like trying to improve my content. And I think that it's a rule in life, like find people that are smarter, better at you than certain things, feed off them. And that's why when people hit me up on Instagram or wherever, like asking for advice, I'm like the first one to give them what I know. Cause if I can help someone steer them in the right direction, it's only going to make you better. I'm a big believer in karma. If you can help someone out, why not? You know, it's going to come back and help you out too. So just like I said, just trying to master more of the content side of things and just watching more stuff and just, you know, just really trying to evolve that way. So yeah, that's pretty much what I'm aiming for this year.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So James, you know, before you go, do you want to, you know, plug in all your social medias, you know, everywhere, you know, your YouTube channel, so, you know, everyone can go and follow your content?
Well, before we do that, I got to thank you for having me on here. It was great talking to you. I love talking about this this stuff, and like I said, I've seen your work. I've watched everything you're doing. Like, it's cool to see your rise and everything that you've been accomplishing as well. So it's just it's awesome to see you and doing it the right way, man. Like, I see you do a variety of content, and that's the key. Like, everyone thinks that if you just interview, because everyone's doing the same interviews for the most part. So you got to remember, you got to find those little angles where you can you know, find a little bit more. So it's been cool to. It was awesome when you invited me on here, because like I said, I'm familiar with your work. I'm going to keep things simple for everyone. At Lynch on Sports. That's my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Lynch on Sports. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, everything's the same. Lynch on Sports. People ask me, why is it not Lynch MMA? If I ever want to go cover other sports, that way I've got myself covered. You know, maybe I will get into hockey eventually and cover that. But for now, it's just Lynch on Sports there. And yeah, thanks again for having me on, man. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely, man. And to everyone watching, peace.